Hello to everyone that has entered so far. Just giving it a few seconds to let some more people roll in. Alrighty, welcome everyone to the Healthy Building webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about the Living Building Challenge through the International Living Future Institute. My name is Kayla Musil. I'm the program manager with the U.S. Green Building Council of West Michigan. We are really excited to have Matt VanSweden, managing director at Foresight Management, and Jack Woller, president and CEO at Blandford Nature Center, with us today. Just a quick housekeeping thing. There's a chat feature and a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us what your favorite thing you did this summer was. Since fall is quickly approaching tomorrow, we can reminisce on summer for a little bit. And then just try to keep your questions to the Q&A feature, just so that it keeps us a little bit more organized at the end of the webinar when we get to that section. Up next in the Healthy Building webinar series, we've got Passive House in November and LEAD in January. If you have missed any of the previous webinars, you can check those out at our YouTube channel. There's a link at the bottom, and these slides will be shared with you after the webinar. So you'll have access to that link, but also if you just search USGBC West Michigan on YouTube, you'll find our channel and you'll see our content on there. And our next webinar, though, is going to be part of the EH0 series again. So we're circling back to this. We were in this series in, I think January through May of this year. So we're circling back and we're going to talk about how the city makes decisions. And that will be next Thursday from 9 to 10:30 a.m. You can sign up for this on our events page, but we've also been highlighting it in our newsletter. So if you get that, there should be a link in our past couple newsletters for this as well. If you are not a member of the USGBC West Michigan, you can scan the QR code to join. We greatly appreciate our members. So if you are one, thank you as always. We can't put this content out without you. And we love seeing you virtually and hope to see you more in person soon as well. And a huge thank you to our visionary supporters, DTE, Consumers Energy, Eagle, and the Wegge Foundation. So here is our agenda for today. We'll have Matt go over LBC, give a high level overview, and then we'll have Jack bring it down to the Blandford level, why they chose to do this work, chose LBC, and just kind of talk about what's going on with the project. And then we'll have the Q&A for about 15 minutes at the end. But before Matt shares his screen, I do have a poll for everyone. If you could just take a second to fill this out for me. Alrighty, that looks pretty good. And here are the results. Looks like most of you have at least heard about it. Some know the petals and imperatives, which is awesome. Great, and a couple of you are experts, which is super fun. All right, I will stop sharing and let Matt take over.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you all this morning. I'm going to see if I can get my technology to work. You should be seeing a screen about the Living Building Challenge. Like most of you know me, Matthew VanSweden here, Foresight Management, Managing Director of the Building Performance Team. I'm really grateful to be here with you all this morning and talk about a passion of mine for more than a decade now, the Living Building Challenge, which is a visionary path to a regenerative future. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Highlands and how that project is pursuing and utilizing Living Building Challenge as well. I will have to say it's good to see some experts in the room, to keep me honest, but there's also a large number of folks that don't have a lot of familiarity with the Living Building Challenge. So there's a lot of ground to cover, and I'm going to keep it pretty high level. And instead of talking super fast, I'm just going to try to hit the keynotes. And forewarning, I still might talk super fast, but if you have any questions as I'm going through this, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll hopefully address them in the Q&A afterwards. So what is the Living Building Challenge, right? In its most basic essence, it's really just the pursuit of what good looks like. So instead of trying to address solutions that are like less bad or maybe don't solve all the problems or challenges that we're facing, the Living Building Challenge is a framework that encourages teams to just ask themselves what good looks like where they are, and then encourages them to relentlessly pursue that solution, that vision of what good looks like. Beyond it being a certification tool, which a lot of us know it for, it certainly is that thing. But what I love about it, it's also a couple other things, namely an advocacy tool. So as I mentioned, I'm about 10 years plus in advocating for Living Building challenge projects, both locally and kind of nationally. And it's a great platform for folks like you all to engage and imagine what a future that you want to envision might look like, and then creates a platform for you to collectively advocate for that on behalf of communities. And so that's just really powerful. So it's not just, like I said, a certification, but it embodies this advocacy mindset. But it's also a philosophy. It's a way of thinking about us humans in relationship with each other and with our natural environments. So it's all three of these things simultaneously, and that's one of the things I love about it. And its elegant approach is it's trying to do layered things. When you just regeneration and regenerative design requires strategy and systems level thinking. And so when you look for those intersections of how you can for solutions that solve for more than one problem, and at its most basic level, the Living Building Challenge is also kind of structured to do that from the lens of philosophy, advocacy to certification. The other thing I love about the Living Building Challenge is its simplicity, its elegance. It really lives into this metaphor of the flower. It's the living building challenge. So it's pretty apt that it utilizes a living metaphor, right? And so it challenges to think of buildings and spaces as flowers, right? If you think about a flower, what is it? Just define some of its characteristics, right? It's certainly rooted in its place. It can't just get up and leave and walk someplace else. It's kind of constrained to its reality and its environment where it is. It harvests all of its own energy and water needs, right? It's non-toxic. It lives in harmony with its surroundings. It changes over time, and it's beautiful, right? It's elegant. It invokes the sense of belonging and beauty. And so the Living Building Challenge is really just a framework to help us all imagine solutions in buildings and spaces that do just that. So structurally, there's two kind of certification pathways as a building certification tool. There's full living building certification, And I'll get into the imperatives and petals in a little bit, but basically there's 20 requirements, and full living buildings pursue and achieve all 20 imperatives. Petal certification is a little bit lesser. There's like 10 core imperatives. They're a little less stringent. And then you have to adopt or identify a water, energy, or materials petal and demonstrate compliance with that entire petal to get petal certification. And what's exciting, like I said, after a lot of advocacy and reaching out and trying to have conversations with clients and folks imagining what a future looks like with regards to regenerative design, we have a couple projects locally that are pursuing these frameworks, these certifications, right? And we're talking about the Highlands on the left today. That's pursuing full living building challenge certification. But we also have another local project that the John Ball Zoo is pursuing as a petal certification. And so it's just really kind of fun and exciting to be in this moment where we have a community that's really wrestling with, the most sustainable standards in the world, and sharing lessons learned with each other and trying to all encourage the collective pursuit of what good looks like for our communities. Living Building Challenge is also sensitive to different typologies, and there's also transects, but that's another slide for another time. But the typologies here is basically like how you can apply it to different sort of project types. You have new buildings, you have existing buildings, you have interior spaces, and you have landscape and infrastructure, right? So, and they each have a little bit unique sort of requirements and challenges and opportunities. And in the rating system, the Living Building Challenge starts to try to address and pivot certain requirements or imperatives unique to each of these typologies. And then we have the petals, right? Living into the flower metaphor, right? It's categories, which are what most of us would call these things are called petals, parts of a flower, right? And there's 7 of them, and they're organized around different sort of opportunities and challenges associated with the built environment. So we have place, we have water, energy, health and happiness, which is mostly about human and our connection to these spaces that we occupy, materials, equity, and beauty. And one of the things I love about the Living Building Challenge is also that it creates space and intentionality around hard topics like equity and beauty. And it really forces and encourages teams to think critically about how they are contributing to those things. Are you contributing to a regenerative or a degenerative future? And also, are you contributing to an equitable or inequitable future, right? And so it kind of forces a dialogue and really encourages reflection and how we are living into those values. And I just really love that the Living Building Challenge elevates that to this level and makes them basically part of the program and requirements for each project. And here are the 20 imperatives. Unfortunately, you don't have the time to kind of go deep into each one of these. But as you can see, they're all kind of related to the different petals. You have a place petal that's really focused on site and context issues, how the site relates to its neighborhood and community. How are we thinking about infrastructure and food systems? And then we have a water petal about net positive water systems, energy, obviously with net positive energy. You have health and about thinking about interior spaces. So that's what's really about the buildings themselves and the quality of space within the buildings. And then what are the buildings made out of? Materials, right? So there's lots of requirements and thinking around where do we get those materials from? Are they toxic? Are they things that we can reuse and salvage available where we are before we go out to the hardware store and buy something new for our projects? So just a really intentional focus around the materials that make up our buildings and spaces. And then, as I mentioned, this idea of equity and inclusion and universal design. And then lastly, one of my favorites, beauty and biophilia. And then just thinking really critically about how we can inspire change, right? Because we don't have a whole lot of time left on the clock, right, to 2030, and how can we accelerate more regenerative projects? And so like asking project teams to really be thoughtful and critical about how they're contributing to inspiring the next generation of leaders in this space is a really important part of this work as well. I went to look how many actual sort of projects we have just to kind of get a really finer point on it. But the case study website is down at the International Living Future Institute, so I couldn't validate the number precisely. But last I checked, it was around 30, 32. So I just put 30 plus just to call it safe. But these projects really range from rural to urban, from small tenant fit out spaces to total new construction projects. Climate zones range from high desert to the very humid south, and from like single family projects all the way up to, you know, million+ square foot developments. And I just did want to take a quick moment and name something here on this slide. So the slides that you're seeing, I didn't put together, not my handiwork. It's their slide deck from the International Living Future Institute. So this is kind of like their ambassador slide deck to like help their ambassadors that they have all around the world communicate to stakeholders about what the Living Building Challenge is. So this slide deck gets downloaded all across the world, and it gets shared as like a vision for the future. And Grand Rapids, or not Grand Rapids, Michigan has a project there. The upper center slide there is the Burbeck at Beacon Springs projects. It's a regenerative farm on the outside of Ann Arbor. And it's just exciting to see kind of local handiwork contributing to a national, international conversation about what regenerative, what a regenerative future looks like, and being shared across the globe. And I noticed that there's some folks from Catalyst Partners. So just want to take a quick moment that their handiwork is to be thanked for that project. I know, I think Amanda Brooks was on the call. Just, you know, credit where credit's due. It's just kind of a remarkable project, and it's interesting that this made its way on a slide deck of an international organization, and it's being shared across the world. And one of the things I told Blandford when we were talking about the Highlands project, and can we do this? Is it the right thing? One of the things we kind of shared was this idea of visibility and like the opportunity to share and have a vision for a future, and how that could be contagious, right? And how it can really accelerate the adoption of similar projects in both our community, but also in our larger world around us, right? And so I think that's a good case study of just how that can contribute to this work here in Grand Rapids, can contribute to an international conversation about kind of future that we all want to occupy. So it's just kind of, like I said, exciting to be in this moment here. So again, super high level. I know I didn't get into the weeds too much, and I'm sure you have lots of questions about what those imperatives actually are. I just want to take a minute to pivot a little bit to talk about, I don't know how simple got on the slide. I apologize, but that wasn't meant to be there because it's not simple. Maybe, you know, the universe has a sense of irony here. Just wanted to pivot and talk about a local project pursuing the Living Building Challenge, and that's the Highlands with our friends at Blandford Nature Center. I also wanted to, speaking of giving credit where credit's due, take a minute to mention that I actually invited the folks at Integrated Architecture, the design team that was responsible for a lot of these concepts, to co-present this portion, but they couldn't make it, unfortunately. But they shared their utmost confidence in me and my ability to kind of share their vision, and they also shared all the visuals that you'll see. So this is largely their slide deck, and I just want to thank them for their contributions. And it's also worth mentioning that largely what follows as a result of a Living Building Challenge feasibility study that I completed while at Catalyst Partners under the leadership of Keith Wynn. So again, I know there's lots of Catalyst folks on the call, and I just wanted to name that we appreciate. And it's exciting to be a part in a moment right now where there's so many teams that are pursuing what good looks like, and it's just an exciting time to be working here in Grand Rapids for sure. So the next sort of couple of slides is why this project, and I'm not going to steal a lot of Jack's thunder because he's going to expound on this, but I did want to, like, from an arc of a storytelling, just briefly mention it, right? So the Highlands project started out, well, it didn't start out. It was a golf course for 100+ years. It was kind of staple in the northwest side of the Grand Rapids. And it then kind of ceased to be functional as a golf course. So there was an opportunity to turn it back into or reclaim it as part of the national heritage. And it became an interesting opportunity to kind of imagine how a space could be transitioned from a very colonial sort of man over nature sort of experience to something that's regenerative, that's exploring pre-colonial conditions and how you share that and give this land back to the community. So in the process of talking about this over the past several years, I became aware that the Highlands connected with the Blandford is, Jack can correct me if I'm wrong, but like 260-ish acres. And it's like one of the largest contiguous nature centers in an urban setting in the country. So it's exciting to have such an asset like this in our community, and especially so with regards to like the gateway into this wonderful asset being also equally inspirational in its pursuit of the Living Building Challenge. So that's a little bit of like context of how this project is has transitioned over time and the opportunity presented itself several years ago. Then there was also this missional intersection of like what Blandford exists to do, which is empower our community through enriching experiences in nature. So what an opportunity to envision kind of a gateway building, support building that embodies a with nature sort of approach rather than above or over nature. And so it became this interesting opportunity to think and manifest these values and this vision, not only on how folks experience the land, but also the infrastructure that creates the enjoyment of the land possible for our community. So back to the big idea here, to keep it pretty high level, rather than drill down into each of the imperatives, which I'll try to hit on. But I did just want to like mention the big idea here is really the integrative design process and what we did as a team to explore the intersections between the Living Building Challenge requirements, the values of the organization that we were serving, and the community that organization was itself serving. Was an interesting kind of interplay of how we think about these options, right? Because what's beautiful about the Living Building Challenge is not a prescriptive approach. It sets the end goal as the desired outcomes, and it basically empowers teams to navigate or to create a pathway to those end desired outcomes that's most appropriate for their context, their situation. And so there's literally millions of variables or options or strategies that you could deploy in the pursuit of the Living Building Challenge. And so what we did as a team, utilizing the integrative design process, is to develop our own set of like voluntary constraints, which we called guiding principles, about how we wanted to make decisions, how we wanted to evaluate the options. And so what you'll kind of see out of these next series of slides is just how these show up and how they intersect with the Living Building Challenge. So we'll start with this idea of being radically inclusive. And this is an interesting one, actually, because in the pursuit of thinking about who uses the site, how can we be most inclusive, how can we be forward thinking, using this idea of universal design as a framework to think about inclusion from a built environment or infrastructure perspective, but also how does it layer over like this idea of biophilic design, which includes indigenous perspectives, right? And so what we kind of, the hard conversation we had was like, hey, we have this idea of being radically inclusive, but at the moment there was just a bunch of white dudes sitting around the table exploring this. So we're like, I think we have a little bit of internal work to do here. And what are the opportunities to change this existing reality that we're all in the room with? And it led to like really through the lens of, for me, like the both the Living Building Challenge, but biophilic design, really thinking about who can we invite to the table that we haven't yet heard from, and how can we engage with them in a meaningful way? And that's just, there's opportunities that are just emerging out of that conversation that have a long sort of lifespan yet on the horizon. But it's just an interesting, using the Living Building Challenge both as an internal advocacy tool about how can we increase the stakeholders' engagement so that we can arrive at better solutions from the start. The next one, tangibly educational, right? So there's passive and active education methods that have different levels of energy and provide different levels of education, right? And this is really connected to the last imperative, education inspiration, right? And so we really wanted to make every solution as visibly and passively educational as possible. We didn't want to hide the mechanical room as an example. We wanted to daylight that and make it visible so that when folks kind of come and look at and are curious about how we're doing what we're doing and making the space comfortable, they can see and we could talk about it without, you know, having to go in a dungeon or like having a different sort of customer journey experience thinking about that thing. And so a lot of this work was just about making the visible or making the invisible visible. So that was a kind of a framework that we try to deploy as often as possible. Inspirationally accessible, right? So this kind of gets at inclusion, and it gets at thinking about universal design, right? So the main thrust of universal design is if you design for the widest spectrum of folks from like a user experience, you actually also design for the most typical, right? And so it's a win-win. Nobody really loses in this scenario. And so it was just an interesting opportunity to think about both the paths, the journey, the entrance experience, but also how the spaces are used from just a wider than typical perspective or lens. The next one, transformationally orienting, right? So how do we navigate the space? How do we feel comfortable navigating the space? What's our comfort level in different kind of modes of in depth of our experience in nature? This is actually, and I'm gonna go through these next series of slides pretty quickly, but this is one of the most interesting expressions of biophilic design that I've encountered, right? It's using it both conceptually and from a layered perspective, but it's just thinking about in this example, it's like the site as it exists, right? It's thinking about what was there. It's thinking about restoring perspectives. So before there was a golf club on the hill that like imposed its will on the land, which is what golf and golf courses largely are. It just doesn't happen by accident. There's a lot of work that goes into that imposition. But what can we do to imagine a different sort of perspective or different philosophy, humankind with nature, working in accordance with, so we can have mutual benefit across and between human and non-human systems, right? And so then we started thinking about all the ways how movement happens throughout the site. You know, what are the natural topography, the masses, how does water kind of move through the site? And this example is really clever, using like this visualization of water and the eddies that occur to really kind of inform the kind of the user experience through the site, for wayfinding, etc. So it's like this layer of thinking about how water flows through the site as just an orientation mode, right? And it's just kind of putting them all together. You kind of get at this site that's doing a lot of things. And unfortunately, I don't have to unpack all the things that there is to see on this site plan, but the rendering here puts lots of things on display, right? It's celebrating the water story. It's talking about the energy story there a little bit. There's both the active solar production on the roof, but there's also a passive buried earth tubes solution towards the right that feeds into the mechanical that's kind of buried into a berm. Obviously, access to nature. There's lots of kind of imperatives and requirements in the Living Building Challenge here. Universal access, those ADA accessible walkways, and providing lots of kind of diversity of pathways throughout the site. Elegantly simple was another sort of constraint that we had. I think we've all heard of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I'd like to elevate maybe a different order of the last two. Keep it stupid simple, meaning like stupid as like the ridiculously simple, slang version of stupid, just because I don't like the derogatory nature of keeping it simple, stupid. Anyway, like the idea here is like in its essence, it was a really simple program. There were really kind of simple orientations and program connection points, and it led to kind of an organic in simple form, which is the floor plan, which you're looking at now. And the other sort of KISS mode that we really deployed is thinking about, can we make the space comfortable without active mechanical cooling, right? What's the simplest version of providing space cooling to the space that we can imagine? And we really pushed the engineering team to think critically about how they're using energy and how they're using active mechanical solutions versus passive solutions. And so really what we deployed, as I mentioned earlier, is a kind of a series of buried earth tubes and buried ductwork to provide passively cooled air to condition the environment to save a bunch of energy. And then it also made its way into our material palette and thinking about how we think about the materiality of the buildings. And the materials petal and all of its imperatives are clearly on display here through the red list, responsible sourcing, thinking about investing in local economies, etc. And then this idea of transparently safe, right? So it needs to be safe, and there's lots of us that have different experiences with nature, and we have to be responsive and respectful of all the different experiences each of the individuals that may visit this space have with nature. So we need to create different sets of experiences, like more typical, maybe a little bit more kind of in between, engaging but still safe. Like you can still have experiences that you're more or less used to, but then also like totally immersive in nature spaces. So that's kind of how we oriented the project and oriented the spaces and opportunity for trails and networks from the kind of central point of the Highlands kind of gateway. And then playfully agile is our last one. And I have this vision here just because it may or may not make its way into its final, but play was an interesting thing that the design team wrestled with. And what you see here is actually an early rendering of this idea of a cave that would be natural, like you would discover as you kind of circumvent the space, and like thinking of young users like, oh, that's interesting, and kind of running and wanting to explore, and just kind of embody that idea of being really playful. And that was just kind of a unique aspect of this project as well, and connected to Biophilic Design. And this last slide is just really from the integrated team thinking about, if we could only do one thing as a design team, what would we want to do? Cultivate a space to lift the spirits and delight the senses was kind of where they landed. And this last slide, I think, is a clear indication of that kind of space. And all was kind of empowered through the pursuit of the philosophy of the Living Building Challenge. So that was a lot. You may be frustrated with lack of detail. I don't know. If you have specific questions, feel free to, like I said, pop them in the chat. I try to keep it pretty high level, as I mentioned, but I'm gonna kind of pass it over to Jack now to talk a little bit about Blandford's unique perspective on this project and the Living Building Challenge.
Thank you, Matt. That was fantastic. Even as many times as I've heard some of those things, and bias on the table, I'm very excited. So my name is Jack Woller. My pronouns are he, him, and it is my privilege to be the president and CEO here at Blandford Nature Center. I have also a very short PowerPoint. It really comes down to maybe 2 slides and some of the same artists and concept renderings that Matthew's shared. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about how we got to this point, and the project overall, because the Living Building Challenge in this facility is only one part of this Highlands project. So Blandford Nature Center, we've existed for a little over 50 years in this location here on the west side. As Matthew said, we are now 264 acres of property, which makes us one of the largest nature centers in the country that exists fully within the city limits. If you've ever been out on the trails with me, one of my favorite things to do is say, where we are here right now, there may be no sight lines to any human built structures, and you don't hear anything but nature as long as I'm not flapping my gums at you. And that really is an incredible asset for our entire community. So again, as Matthew touched on, the last 110 years for this property had been a golf course. And, you know, though it looks like a very natural environment, it is about the opposite of that, right? So we know that for those 100, plus years, there were over 5.5 tons of pesticides, chemicals, and fertilizer poured annually on the property. And that what we were dealing with was something that looked really natural, but very much was not. To back up a half step there, first we had to acquire the property. And when the property went up for sale, it sold to a development company who was going to put 366 houses and mixed-use commercial retail on it. As an organization, our heart sunk at that. And what started out as a process of saying, you know, would you consider donating the property to Blandford? No. Would you consider a 10-acre, natural barrier that we could create between the property here and the houses? Also didn't necessarily come through, but what it yielded was a little down the road. We were able to purchase the property with our partners in the Land Conservancy of West Michigan and start this project off. And I bring up the Land Conservancy of West Michigan both because they are our partners on this project, but also this once in a forever opportunity would not be possible without the collaboration both between our organizations, the City of Grand Rapids, and many of the partner organizations that both Matthew listed and that I will omit, not by intention, but really this project is an example of what is possible through collaboration. So I frequently get the question, is this what happens to a golf course if you just let it go? If you've been out here anytime recently, particularly through peak wildflower season, that's a tempting thing to ask and also hope for, but unfortunately that is not the case. So what starts the process out is a complete herbiciding of all the non-native monoculture of turf grass in the property. And then some very intentional seeding and otherwise to get some plants to start growing, both to choke out the space for the invasive or monoculture of turf grass from coming back, as well as to start pulling some of those chemicals out of the soil. To date, we have planted over 55 million seeds and a little over 3,000 trees on the property. The property is designed to be headed back to native prairie land and oak savanna. Only 1% of the native prairie land that existed in Michigan still exists today. And so the ability to take 121 acres and return it to that is pretty significant, not just for habitat creation and such like that, but the property itself, just the 121 acres of the Highlands will sequester over 200 tons of carbon annually. So it's a very exciting project. It's a very exciting asset. I am going to struggle here to keep myself on track and talk as much as possible about the living building challenge, because there are just, an incredible number of exciting things happening on there. Last plug on that one of the examples of that is this month, we'll be wrapping up a stream daylighting project on the east side of the property. When this was created as a golf course 110 years ago, they took a stormwater drain, the Reed Barlow drain that comes out of our the residential area on the south side of the property from our neighbors. And they buried it under a pipe and under a fairway. That then in complete darkness, about as fast as possible, shot all of that stormwater and the polluted stormwater runoff underground and then dumping into immediately Indian Mill Creek and thus the Grand River watershed. What we're doing with our partners, the Land Conservancy of West Michigan, is bringing that up to the surface so that not only it can be exposed to the sunlight, but it can be slowed down. It can be exposed to the native plantings on the banks in the floodplain. And hopefully then, well, not hopefully, it will then have a greater opportunity to incorporate into the groundwater as well. Also stabilizes all of the kind of Indian Mill Creek, the creek on our property and downstream. Really exciting number on that is it'll purify 5.5 million gallons of water before it dumps into the Grand River watershed. So, shameless self-plug there on that aspects of the many things going on this property. And now having said that, I'm going to share my much shorter PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully now you'll be seeing this black and white screen that we're going to spend very little time on. And we're going to go to my main slide here, which is this: why the living building challenge? And if I was going to reduce this down, to the lowest possible denominator, probably the answer is triple bottom line. But to take that a step further, it really falls into these three buckets for us. And the first one being sustainability and impact. And I'm going to split that into two sections of both community and what that looks like outside of our own organization, as well as for our own organization. But when I talk about community sustainability and impact, nature centers have one of the broadest reaches of any quote unquote sustainability organization, whether it's impacting and interacting with community at the K-5 level, to community programs for older, collaboration. We touch an awful lot of places and have a very broad reach in sustainability. So it's you see an awful lot of these projects of that, right about 30, 32 that actually exist in nature centers. There is an awful lot of reasons for that I'm not going to go into, but what we do have here is an opportunity to both pattern forward a way that allows us to hit all of the kind of core values and mission deliverables we have as an organization, as well as patterning forward that to live a more responsible life. Even in construction projects, we do not have to give up the things of which we connect with and which hit even, again, aspects of the economic impact for our organizations. Using that to move into the organizational part of it, part of the decision-making process for us as an organization into why Living Building Challenge came from an awful lot of aspects of our own individual sustainability. And as much as a president CEO of a nonprofit organization, I'm going to bring it back regularly to the delivery and the impact of our mission. I also have to pay attention to the aspects of the organization's overall sustainability. And it would be remiss if I didn't mention the aspects of both increased revenue streams that this presents to us as an organization, the ability to develop new and innovative programming surrounding both the land itself and the building. Here at Blandford, again, 264 acres, but many of those acres have been in, erosion sensitive areas surrounding Brandywine Creek and other areas where we can't say go off trail and explore because of the environmental and ecological impact of that exploration. Justin Hessling at the Land Conservancy has taken in many times and saying we could do nothing to the property at the Highlands and it would be better than the 5.5 tons of chemicals and what would happen with the golf course. Because of that, the land itself is not as fragile. So we can activate the property in a more holistic way, which allows us to create a classroom or an experimental lab where we can utilize an experience design principles and predict with a high probability of success that when visitors come to our property, they can have these aha moments, these epiphanies, these explorations and discoveries that are their own. And what that means as opposed to a traditional lecture center or lecture setting is just night and day different. So what we have here is a true both responsibility and opportunity to activate this land. And what that means for the sustainability of us through earned revenue streams, but also through collaboration and really community activation is huge. The second thing on here that really goes into it for us is the kind of performance versus theoretical. I'm currently sitting in one of 16 of our facilities over that 264 acres, the oldest of those facilities being our one-room schoolhouse, which was built in 1853. And before we were on this webinar, Matthew and I were talking about those buildings, and Matthew said, yes, shockingly, that may be the one that has the most in common with the Living Building Challenge. So we've got a couple centuries apart. And including other facilities like the one I'm currently sitting in, which is a LEED certified facility. And we wanted to ask, well, what is this look like from a performance-based certification process, as opposed to maybe more of a theoretical? As a nature center, the bar is pretty high for us to be building any building on any part of nature. So to be able to even get to this point, we've had to feel confident in being able to clear that bar, and the full certification of the Living Building Challenge is definitely that. Beyond that, the last one that I'll highlight here as to the kind of reasons why the Living Building Challenge for us goes to this healthy interrelationship with nature, kind of this aspect of human wellness or holistic wellness. I'm not a fan of throwing anyone or any process under the bus, and I don't. Hopefully, this isn't that too. But I wasn't asked to talk about well certification. But I do an awful lot of work in human-centered design, and one of the things that's always bothered me is that presupposes that humans are the apex, and that the wellness of the individuals and the occupants of the building being number one. What's very much appealed to us about the Living Building Challenge is that it is as much a part, arguably more, maybe for some of our stakeholders and those involved, that it prioritizes the benefits to the natural environment just as much as the humans. And any of us who have worked in these areas understand that that doesn't mean that human interest in human wellness and human health doesn't come along with that. Our health and wellness is directly tied to the health and wellness of the environment. And the Living Building Challenge seems to be the best match for us as we look again to truly activating this land and creating something that is not only value added and an incredible asset to the community and quite honestly the whole state, but also in our ability to continue to grow into our next 50 years and in what true activation of that land looks like. The flower metaphor is an accurate one. I think that really wraps up to us why the Living Building Challenge was, the choice for us in this. And, probably maybe even better the question is, which Matthew has shared, and that the Living Building Challenge and Living Futures Institute is, what does good look like? It's allowed us to look at aspects of this facility and other design to say, do we need a shower in it, or are we putting a shower in it only because it's a requirement for LEED certification? This has allowed us to actually incorporate into what good looks like for us in the nature center sector, what that good looks like for the equity, inclusion, and universal access petals to this, and has forced us to look at this as something much more than a simple kind of construction project and bathrooms and parking lots and such to be able to then launch people into nature. If I'm going to use the last tiny second here of my time as well to jump back to a couple other aspects of the sustainability and impact. I'd be lying if I didn't mention the fact that because of the fact that there are less than 30 fully certified commercial facilities in the Living Building Challenge and none in the state of Michigan, that is an aspect of us that we understand represents a significant part of institutional marketing and the ability for Blandford to go from being seen by many people as a place their children go on field trips to the world-class facility of which it is. And that represents a pretty big part of us moving into the future too. Over 950, I believe at last count, a well certified or Fitwell certified. I have no clue what that is in LEED certification, but we're very interested in what we have as both our responsibility and our opportunity for not just sustainability, but truly performance-based impact, and also the aspects of a healthy interrelationship with nature. Again, the bar is very high for us, and we feel that as an organization, our stakeholders are not only human. So with that, I'm going to resist the urge to go off and talk about all of the habitat creation and all of the incredible things that are happening on the property. And then I'll probably just use that as an opportunity to close with an invitation to everyone that my information and contact information is available on the website and such. I'd love to have everybody out. It is really an incredible place, and with very, very exciting things continuing on the horizon. With that, I think that brings us to 11:50, and I cede my time back. Happy to answer any questions and anything else as well.
Thank you so much, Jack and Matt, both. Those were great presentations, and it's so nice to hear about this project as someone who has walked the Highlands and recently got my Living Future accreditation. I'm so excited for this project and can't wait to see it as it progresses and when it's finally done. So thank you again. It was a wonderful presentation. I did want to maybe ask a clarifying question because we talked about Burbeck in the state of Michigan. That is a residential property, correct? Residentially certified, but there is no commercially certified Living Building Challenge in the state of Michigan.
Correct.
Great. I think you guys both did a great job. There's I don't have any questions that have come through so far. I mean, I have a couple of my own, but yeah, if any of you have any questions, please, throw them in the chat, throw them in the Q&A, wherever you want. Both Matt and Jack seem to be, good with sharing their contact information. That'll be shared in our follow-up email, so you can always reach out to them with questions. But I was curious, I know you did the high level overview, but maybe if we go into detail on just one of them of like, you mentioned, with a lot of other certifications, there's certain requirements for you to get there. It's point-based, you have to check boxes. And with LBC, you can get there how you want. You can show how you got to a certain imperative. Can you give an example on, like, let's say beauty and biophilia, like how you get there, or like how you can show that you got there?
Yeah, and I'll also add a little bit of clarity. There isn't like zero requirements or like frameworks and expected things that project teams need to accomplish, but it's really loose. So in this biophilic design example that you're asking about, right, there's a requirement to have the team have like a facilitated day-long biophilic design workshop where they explore all the different ways, all the different theories and opportunities that biophilic design represents, and like create a plan of how they're going to incorporate that. And so they have like a minimum set of expectations around that too, like how many you implement per square feet. But like what was kind of interesting, through the integrative design process, organically, biophilic opportunities just like there's such a rich story here through the lens of biophilic design, and it goes way deeper than just like adding circular columns, incorporating natural color palettes, natural materials like wood, putting green things on the roof and walls. We're doing some of that obviously, but for me, what's really interesting about biophilic design is also really connected to place and its history and context, and evolved human nature relationships, and evolved human cultural relationships, right? And I don't think it would have the opportunity to really engage with local Native American and Indigenous communities wouldn't have come up if we weren't really like thinking about how can we both be as inclusive as possible, and also like how can we really lean into like traditional ecological knowledge based off the biophilic design principle of like indigenous perspectives, right? So it was like an honest leaning into those things that led to a kind of rich kind of story and narrative around some of the opportunities that weren't specifically, here's the checklist things you needed to do, right? And it was also a change in philosophy. We could have certainly done like, oh, we have the 8 hours, here's our agenda item, here's the people that were there, here's the 5 biophilic design strategies we're going to deploy, and let that be like how we demonstrate compliance. But the whole team really embraced this whole philosophy and using the framework to pursue a question and pursue it as authentically as possible, which for building certification to have any sort of legitimacy, you kind of need both, right? But what I love about Living Building Challenge is that certainly over indexes towards like the performance versus the prescriptive requirements. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. We did have a question come through the chat from Rebecca. So she says, I understand that all sorts of skill sets and competencies are required in partnership for success in the pursuit of living building design. I'm curious if you know how traditional tradespeople, for example, carpenters and electricians, can prepare themselves to pivot to be involved in this work, particularly in Michigan. If they don't play a big role in these efforts, that would be helpful to know too.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at this, Jack. I don't know if you have any thoughts, but you can certainly jump in too. But what, the material palette slide that I showed wasn't an accidental material palette, right? We did a lot of research into compliant products through the lens of like LBC and declare that from local manufacturers. We looked at what local trades and skill sets were available locally. We have to be very West Michigan has a deep manufacturing industrial base, right? And so we have the privilege of having lots of access to really high caliber manufacturers. So like the materials petal, once we kind of get in and build relationships with folks that are building things, I mean, from a practical, like here's the minimum requirements perspective, I mean, it's still challenging, but we have a benefit as a community because we have close proximity to a lot of industry and have a deep care for conservation kind of in our DNA. So the tactical requirements aren't that challenging, but to get to the question, right, we did think about how we can engage both like salvage and like how different utilizing salvage material is, both from a design, from a tradesperson perspective, like how do we make something beautiful out of something found objects, requires an intuition and a craft that isn't just like the traditional concrete trades showing up and doing things per spec, right? And so that challenges both the design team to think a little bit creatively about how refined or like how baked their design is to allow for that discovery as you kind of identify those partners and opportunities for materials. But it's also from a contractor perspective, how can we break up large projects or large scopes into smaller so that more local folks that maybe don't have as much experience with larger projects or tick all the boxes that you would typically need to tick to be competitive in a traditional design bid build sort of process, and develop relationships. And it's really, at its foundation, it's relational so that we can just be aware of who's available. And we've done obviously some of our best intention and work into being as aware as we can, but we certainly aren't aware of everybody that's out there. And so really it's just like being aware and then creating some space for including those different requirements that would be required to get more engagement of smaller folks into the project. And we're again, this is concept, right? So we have an intention around this. We don't really have a fully fledged plan yet because we haven't had to cross that bridge quite yet. But we're aware, like even like from a spec writing perspective, some of our requirements need to change to break up the scales and scope so that a more diverse set of trades folks can participate in the project.
I just want to add one thing that I've found unsurprising, but also a part of this, and that, you know, one of the challenges here as we look at moving forward, and one of the benefits to having, you know, these two ongoing projects at Surrounding Living Building Challenge, both here and at the zoo, is that it's not really known how to permit a lot of these things. So we are forging new ground in some ways that is made easier because of these ongoing projects and the willingness to collaborate between organizations. But there are these unknowns that even the city's coming back with, you know, aspects of water petal or otherwise, is that we don't know how to permit this. It's never happened before. So that clearly creates a challenge as we want to, you know, not only make this more commonplace, but not have to, as an organization, jump all of these hurdles to permitting, because from our perspective, that's nobody's good day, is having to deal with a bunch of permits. But on the other end, what it represents is something worthwhile doing. So I'm not sure exactly how, you know, that really then translates, and I leave that to Matthew and others as far as, you know, the question on, you know, any sort of kind of what's involved in pivoting to this particular work. But that aspect of it is both a challenge and something that's exciting to us about it, and that I guess overall I'm feeling more confident in because, again, of our partners, including, you know, the John Ball Zoo.
Great. Thank you again, both, so much for your presentations and answering those questions. We will be sharing out the slides, and the webinar is recorded. So in case anyone wants to go back and look at anything, that'll be on our YouTube channel. We'll share Matt and Jack's information out as well if you have any additional questions. I think I can speak for everybody to say that this looks like an awesome project, and I can't wait to go back to the Highlands again when it's all, I will be there before that, but when it's all done, and to check it out. So again, thank you. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
It's been a pleasure.